Hi everyone, and welcome to today's webinar run by Onboarding. This webinar is titled How to Wow New Hires When Onboarding Remotely. We've got a really great session planned for the next hour and some really great speakers lined up. So I don't want to waste any more time. Let's get into it. To quickly go over the agenda, I'll go over some introductions and housekeeping. I'm going to take about 10 minutes of our time today to talk about the evolution of onboarding. We're going to get into our panel discussion. We've got 3 incredible speakers lined up. I'm so excited to hear from them. And then finally, we'll save some time for the end of the hour for some audience Q&A. So I had to say it. Hey, all you cool cats and kittens. Thank you so much for joining us today. Really appreciate that we've had so many wonderful attendees join us. So before we get started, I will go over some housekeeping items. Number one, as I mentioned before, we will do audience Q&A at the end of the hour, so probably 10 to 15 minutes at the end. If you have any questions, you can submit them in the Q&A at the bottom of your little Zoom panel there. We'll try to get to as many as we can. If we don't get to your question, I'll make sure that we have someone follow up with you personally. Secondly, this presentation is being recorded, and we'll email out the recording to you following the presentation. And finally, this is the first of an ongoing digital event series. As I mentioned before, we have an incredible audience, really experts in your field. So if you have any ideas for topics or speakers that we could potentially cover in an upcoming webinar or digital event, please do share it with us. Okay, so let's get into introductions. So my name is Jen. I'm today's moderator and host. I'm the field marketing manager here at Onboarding. I'm joined by 3 incredible panelists. I'm going to start with Jenn. Jenn Perry is the onboarding logistics manager at Shopify. Jenn, can you tell us a little bit about what Shopify does and the project that you're working on at the moment?
Yeah, so thanks for having me today. Shopify is a global commerce company, so we focus on making commerce better for everyone. We provide the tools for anyone to start or manage a new business or even grow their existing business. Currently, my team is focused on revamping and automating our onboarding processes and comms to be more efficient and scalable. And so we're currently actually in the implementation process with Onboarding to help us get there.
Yeah, we were so excited when we landed Shopify as a customer, so we're equally, if not more excited to be working with you guys. Okay, next we have Akbar Karenga. He's a talent coach at Founders Factory. Akbar, can you tell us about your background in remote hiring and onboarding?
Yeah, for 5 years, I was recruiting for Education First. They are international education and travel business. The first 3 years was being based in Shanghai, doing the visa process and onboarding people to land in Shanghai when that was their first time being in the country. Then for an additional 2 years, it was based in London. My hiring managers were from Mexico City to Tokyo, and that was kind of being slightly more soft touch. As they built their local teams, I was the person helping them build policies from London.
That's really cool. And last but not least, we have Tanya Dutra. She's VP of People Operations at Endgame 360. Tanya, can you tell us what Endgame 360 does?
Sure. So we're a 100% remote digital media company that runs cheatsheet.com, sportscasting.com, and motorbiscuit.com. And we're fully committed to providing our 50+ million monthly readers with high quality content.
Cool, thank you. Okay, so now that the audience has had a chance to learn a little bit about the speakers, we want to get to know a little bit about you guys. So I'm going to launch wait a second, just give me 1 minute here. I just have to launch our poll. Okay, so actually this isn't a poll. If you guys want, please let us know what interesting hobbies have you taken up since working from home. Just let us know in the chat box and I'll read out some if we get any interesting ones.
Jen, while they're thinking and writing, what about you? What did you pick up?
Gosh, I haven't really done much. I've picked up a lot of Netflix. How about you guys? Wow, we've got some really cool examples. Puzzles, ukulele, napping. Yeah, I'm doing a lot of napping. TikTok, cooking, people watching from my window, homeschooling. that doesn't sound fun. Knitting. And what about our panelists? Have you guys taken up any interesting hobbies?
I'd join you with the Netflix.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say watching all of the horrible, horrible things on Netflix. It's wonderful.
Okay, let's move on to the next question. So I'm going to launch a poll. Which statement best describes you right now? This one's a fun one. Oh my gosh, we're getting quite a split. I'm impressed with those of you in the audience that are saying that the statement going for a 5K daily run best describes you right now. Okay, one more second. Okay. And you guys can see the results there. Somewhere in between, yeah. I'd say that's about right. Cool. All right, thanks, guys. Okay, so before we jump into our panel discussion, I want to get into a little bit about the evolution of onboarding. And I wanted to introduce this concept of the 4 C's. And the 4 C's, it was a report that was published by Dr. Taylor Bauer from the SHRM Foundation. And it's this concept that says that companies that are using a good combination of all these 4 C's will have the most success in your onboarding program. And so what are the 4 C's? Great question. I'm going to tell you. So the first one is clarification. This is where a new hire has very clear understanding of their role and responsibilities. And not only that, but other team members and members of the organization also understand that new hire's role and responsibilities. And interestingly, according to the report that was published in SHRM, role clarification is the most consistent predictor of job satisfaction and organizational commitment during the onboarding process. Next up, we have compliance. We all know what this is. Nobody likes to do it. It's a necessary evil. Things like payroll, tax forms, health and safety checks. There's a number of ways that you could do compliance in your onboarding program. You could drip feed it to the new hire during pre-boarding so that everything's taken care of by the time they start on day 1. You could also gamify it. Either way, the point is that compliance doesn't have to be fun, but it absolutely should be efficient, and that in itself is what creates a good, positive experience. Next, we have culture. We all know what this means. It refers to the organization's politics, its goals and values, the unique language. Culture is not just free snacks and work perks. It's a lot more than that. And the sooner that an employee can adopt a company culture, the higher their chance of a long-term success of your organization. And finally, the last C is connection. Connection refers to all the interpersonal relationships that we build at work with our boss, with our colleagues, our work wives, work hubbies. All of those relationships are so critical to our satisfaction and commitment and happiness at work. And so when we look at all those 4 C's, what we can do is basically put together a matrix, a maturity level of onboarding matrix. And so in this slide here, we've got levels 1 and 2, which is what we like to call at Onboarder traditional onboarding, which is where you have compliance and you have a little bit of clarification. We have level 3, which is proactive onboarding, and that's where you're using all 4 C's together. But what's interesting, and this is what we found as we were doing research, because this entire concept is what has informed our remote work and remote onboarding best practice workflow that we've recently launched in our platform. But what we found is that as people continue to research this topic, they found that actually 1 C had the greatest impact on an employee's success and the success of an onboarding program, and that C is connection. And what world-class employers realize is that they need to put connection at the core of their onboarding program to really make a difference. And so when we were doing all this research, we couldn't help but question, well, what about employee experience? Like, we are living in the experience era. People are expecting a good experience out of almost everything nowadays. Where does employee experience fit into this? And what we realize is that experience is what brings it all together, and it's experience that sparks that connection. And so enter experience-driven onboarding, which is what puts human connection at its core and incorporates 3 other essential elements of onboarding. And it looks at onboarding through the lens of employee experience to really deliver outstanding and wow experiences for your new hires. And so I want to bring this conversation back to our panelists now and talk about these 4 C's and think of some ideas of how can we adapt things that you would do normally for clarification and onboarding. How would you adapt that for remote onboarding? And so let's start with Jenn. What are some things that you guys at Shopify are doing to adjust your onboarding for remote workers in terms of clarifying their role and responsibilities?
Yeah, so I mean, is that the compliance piece, right? Probably one of the most boring parts of the onboarding process already, but something that we have always done, and being that part of our workforce is already remote. So transitioning the whole company to remote just means really tweaking everybody to get that same experience. And so for us, we make sure that these pieces are completed before their first day. New hires get access to our HRM software before they start, so they can get sort of those important pieces out of the way. As well, our IT team makes sure that all of our new hires have like their equipment and accounts set up for day one. So the idea is that when they start, they can really like get into like our startup program, where they're going to really go through our company culture and values and everything like that. And they don't have to really worry about those compliant pieces. They come in, they already know what their job is, and what tools they need to do their job well.
Yeah, and what about culture? Do you guys have any ideas of how we can kind of replicate that culture building activity that we do in offices or at work, but how can we do that remotely? I think that's probably.
Yeah.
Jen?
Yeah, I can go again. So for us, I mean, culture at Shopify is super important. We're actually like known for our sort of startup culture, even though we've grown well beyond a startup. So for us, it's things like trying to find that balance of fun ways that we can connect together. This could be things like we have teams that do Cribs episodes together, optional Netflix parties after hours. We have a very active Animal Crossing channel on Slack. So just getting everybody involved and letting them know in the beginning that there are fun things you can do. You can sort of like mix your day up a little bit, and you're probably going to find a large group of people who have the similar interests to you.
And this question is for Tanya. Tanya, Endgame 360, you guys are 100% remote. How do you foster that connection building in a remote environment?
So we do a lot of like all company chats, and a little similar to what Jen was saying, we have different Slack channels, and people can talk to people of same interest. So if somebody wants to read books or go running, they can find other people in the company with that similar interest.
Cool. And Akbar, any last thoughts on the clarification piece?
Yes. Also, clarification or culture?
Let's talk clarification.
Yeah. So being your hiring managers being the quote unquote manager of a new starter, they usually can see if somebody's doing their job. Then remotely, you've got to be more explicit in terms of outputs that you expect. Mm-hmm. So breaking down the onboarding, first probation, 3 months with weekly, monthly, end of probation, end of project goals, or like KPIs.
And I think it's important to note too, the clarification piece isn't just for that new hire. You should also be clarifying what's expected from the manager, especially if they're new to remote onboarding. Just kind of reminding your hiring manager that here are some things that you should be doing. You should check in daily with your new hire, whatever it is that you want them to be doing, and just kind of add that clarification layer for the managers as well. Okay, so let's continue. Before we get started with our panelists, I want to ask the audience another question. So using the 4Cs model and knowing now what you know about this concept, how mature would you rank your onboarding program? So let me just launch this next poll. Okay. Nice. I'm really impressed to see that there's a lot of people saying that they are level 3 proactive onboarding, and even a few level 4 experience-driven onboarding, which makes me suspicious that they're our customers. Okay, I'll give you a few more seconds and then we'll reveal the answers. Okay, can everybody see? Cool. Level 3 proactive onboarding. I figure typically if you're interested in onboarding and you're taking the time out of your day to attend a remote onboarding, you probably already have a decent program, or you have like some aspects of the 4Cs. So that's great to see. I'm happy that most of the people in the audience would say that they're proactively onboarding. Cool. Okay, and then another audience question. Let me launch it. I'll give you guys a few more seconds. So majority of the audience has said that their biggest challenge is ensuring that every new hire has the same onboarding experience. Yeah, we hear that a lot. And yeah, number 2 being encouraging the hiring managers to take more ownership. Yeah, that really resonates with the challenges that a lot of our customers come to us with. Okay, cool. Thanks, everyone. So now let's talk to our panelists and get their insights. So what would you guys say are the challenges of remote onboarding? And I'm going to start with Akbar here. Yo, you're muted.
I wasn't saying something interesting anyway. I would say the initial challenge is just culturally, if you're transitioning to a business that was traditionally face-to-face to remote, is there's certain things that are going to be new, certain things that are going to break, and that's an uncomfortable initial realization. So beginning with, it's going to be a work in progress, and just MVP and learn as quickly as you can is a strong thing that I think a lot of businesses that I've seen in our startup portfolio have initially started having trouble with.
Jenn, anything, especially in light of the current situation we're all living in, have there been any unique challenges that you guys have come up against?
Yeah, so onboarding has been an interesting one because we were, before all this happened, we were really growing our international onboarding, and we had sort of tailored a lot of our start dates, for example, to that. So we did have to take a look at how we could really bring that back, realign everybody, essentially, because now we're looking at, instead of having like groups of workers in different areas of the world, it's essentially everybody's online, everybody's in the big wide web world. So looking at realigning that for us has been a bit of a shift for us, but overall it's gone really well.
You were saying, I remember in one of our calls before the presentation, that something that you've come up against is just getting like shipments delivered to your new hires on time, given the amount of delays with the mail system all over the world. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so that's been an interesting one as well. It really comes down to international being a really big challenge for us. And so we do have, like, we've run into some countries where they're not even accepting deliveries right now. So working with how can we still get that, new hires started on day one if we're not able to get them a laptop, if we're not able to get them, their swag and all the great, things that we want to send them before they get started. So that's definitely been a big challenge as well, is putting that all together. And then as well, like looking at the fact that we're now shipping out a much larger quantity of equipment than we ever did previously.
Yeah, because I think the great thing about Shopify, and the reason that I reached out to you, is because I saw you guys posted on LinkedIn that you're still hiring and you're still onboarding all remotely. And I think it's great that you guys are continuing to hire and you're doing well given the current environment. So hats off to you guys. And Tanya, I'm curious, have you found any kind of remote onboarding challenges at Endgame 360 that you might not have experienced in a previous role or at an in-person type job?
Well, one challenge just with a remote company is sometimes a new hire may not realize the difficulty that they might have in adjusting to working remotely. Right. And then they sometimes miss the social aspects and structure of going to a work office, like a physical office. So, we support that by providing them structure or helping them structure their day, with a start and time, and helping them determine their workflow during the day. And then also outside of the current, conditions, we would encourage them to do a co-working space or go work at a cafe or a library or something like that.
Yeah, I don't know about you guys, but I am not adjusting well to working remotely. I just really love the atmosphere of being at work and with colleagues. And I'm sure I'm not the only one here, but definitely been a struggle.
Yeah, Jenn, I thought I'd jump in there. So we've been using a mental health app called Inside Out.
Oh, yeah.
It's on demand. It's with the individual employee to reach out and they get connected with a video with a clinician. We've realized that touch points around staying mentally healthy have been something that we should look at closer. So inside out, but Calm and Unmind also really good apps.
Yeah. And that's so important too, especially given the situation we're all living in. There's just so much anxiety and uncertainty, and it's important that employees are reminded that their wellness and mental health is important and important to the company that they're working for as well. Okay, so let's move on. Let's talk about how your organizations have adjusted to remote onboarding. So we kind of already touched on this a little bit with Jenn at Shopify, but Akbar, what are your clients doing to adjust?
So adjust is documenting a lot of things that were always going to be done in that informal coffee chat. So what is your culture? Show it in a video, give case studies. That is not something that, look, you can see us being who we are, is one element there. That's also led to sometimes repurposing, maybe direct to customer marketing. I'm thinking, what does that say about us as a business? It actually happened this morning in one of our startups where we had to look at their complicated tech solution for marketing aggregation, but actually how they explain it to their customer really was able to help with the onboarding of new staff who were not as technical.
So I remember in one of our calls that you and I had, you talked about a first step in adapting your program for remote work is look at the tasks that are asynchronous and synchronous. Can you chat a little bit more about that for our audience?
Yeah, I use that term and realize it's pretend. So synchronous means it has to happen in time together with two people. Asynchronous is it's done self-serve on your own time. A typical asynchronous thing is the compliance. You don't need to be live while somebody's signing their contract. But what is synchronous is that lovely first lunch that they have with their hiring manager. So one of the things that we've employed is we've got a Pleo account and say, okay, order lunch into your house and your hiring manager is going to do the same and you have lunch together sometime in your first week.
Cool. So actually, I just had a peek at some of the questions, and there was a few questions that came up for Jenn actually, and talking about how you've had to adjust for remote workers. You mentioned that something that's been a bit of a challenge is making sure that new hires are getting all their tech on time. And so some of the questions that are coming up is, well, what's the contingency plan if that new hire doesn't get their tech?
Yeah, it's a really great question. I had a feeling that one was coming. So we've really been having to look at it at an individual basis. Lucky it hasn't happened. I think we've only actually had it happen once so far where somebody literally cannot get their equipment before they start. Before we even start to explore their options, it really, like extreme options, I guess I'd say, is it is really like our IT team has been working, around the clock to just work out other ways that they might be able to get equipment, whether it is things like seeing if there is somebody else in that country that does work for us that might be able to go out and buy one locally rather than us shipping. And then sort of that last resort piece would be, okay, what do they have as a personal piece of equipment? Is it something that we can, that will work with our systems, that will, our security team will approve? And luckily for the one hire that was able to happen. So they're starting on their personal equipment until we can get them their Shopify tech, I guess you could say.
Yeah, cool, thank you. Okay, let's move on to the next question. So we talked about connection being the most critical component of, a really world-class onboarding program. So what are some ways, especially in a remote environment, how can we really create those moments that matter? So how can we celebrate milestones? How can we, make a new hire feel that they're accepted as an individual, but they also belong as a member of the team? Let's talk with Tanya first, because you guys have been doing this for forever, really. What are some ways that you guys kind of spark that human connection?
So really it starts with the hiring process. We really let the managers take the lead. That way they can start forming those relationships. And then we try to get them to connect with current staff members as quickly as possible once they get in. So we introduce them to the team and let them start being a part of their team calls right from day one. And then we encourage managers to have weekly meetings with all new hires, and we also provide them with performance reviews as well. So that way they know the areas that they're winning, and it also reinforces the culture of feedback we like to have.
Yeah, cool. Thank you. So this is a question for all of our speakers. I mean, speaking personally from experience, when I started a new job, I'm quite shy. I want to make a good impression. I'm not likely to ruffle any feathers. And I can imagine in a remote environment, it's much harder to kind of voice any concerns, or, you know, let somebody know if you're not having a good time, or you're feeling anxious, or whatever it is, if you're not having a good experience during onboarding. How can we actually pick up on those cues, especially if new hires are a little bit more shy to be more vocal? How do we encourage them to, you know, communicate and give feedback and that kind of thing? Akbar, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, of course. So across our whole portfolio, we try and employ 360 reviews across their probation, and there is a sense check for people internally in the first month, and then we open up to more people when we're making the final probation decision at the end of 3 months, so that they're already giving feedback on people around them. So it doesn't have to be a direct, I'm speaking to my hiring manager. And then another element is, it starts off actually at pre-boarding. If you are creating cohorts in a WhatsApp group of people who are starting at similar time, so that they got other people that is not their line manager that they can open up to, that they've already got a certain intimacy and psychological safety.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Jenn, do you have anything else to add here?
It's actually similar to what Akbar said. So really that cohort of people that start together, that's your very first bond. At Shopify, we have a Slack channel that is for every new cohort gets a Slack channel that they are all in, and they typically stay within it for a long time after, sometimes years. We'll see these channels stay open. So that's a really great way to be able to, you know, ask questions that you might think are stupid questions, and give, you know, any feedback and anything like that as well. You know, we have our leads, you know, are very much encouraged to try to form those bonds from day one. They have, you know, a lunch on the very first day with their new hire, something we're continuing remotely, a virtual lunch, just like Akbar mentioned as well. And so it's just really build, you know, the lead is leading sort of that relationship building with their new hire, but then they also do have that entire cohort that they can go to if they are feeling uncomfortable.
Yeah, it is so important just to have that. Like, we always recommend to our customers to implement a buddy system or a buddy program or mentor program. Just having that contact at a new company that you can go to with, you know, questions that you might not feel comfortable asking your boss about, like, when am I getting paid? Or so that's a great idea to, you know, welcome everybody as groups and cohorts as well. Okay. This is an audience question, so I'm going to launch a poll. We're curious to know, how are you guys currently managing your onboarding program? So I'll give you a few seconds to answer that. Okay, I'll give you a few more seconds to answer. Thanks to everybody who's given their answers. It's interesting, 59% of the audience are saying your onboarding is entirely manual. I mean, it's doable, but it's tough. Okay, thanks everyone. I'm gonna share the results. Can everyone see that? Okay. Thank you. Okay, and then this is our final question for our panelists. So I'm curious, how do you guys measure the success of an onboarding program? And what are some metrics that the audience can be using to measure that? So let's start with Jenn again. How do you guys, and I know you're kind of in the middle of revamping your onboarding program, so it might be difficult to answer this, but if you wanted to answer future looking, how some ways that you would measure it?
Yeah, because I can say right away that this is something that we don't do well right now. And so looking at how we can utilize Onboarder to collect more data from our new hires. So things like touch points, determining which touch points and when we have touch points and at what point are those touch points actually helpful to us. Something that we have been doing sort of surveys at different points. And one of the things that I hear a lot is that any survey that you have questions that you give a new hire in their first couple of days in the company, for example, are always going to be hugely highly positive results. They're almost, whether or not they had a good experience, oftentimes they're just going to select the highest ones. So trying to figure out what those touch points look like. And that's something that we're going to be working really a lot with Onboarder on, as well as implementing what that's going to look like for us.
Yeah. Yeah, and I know in the tool, even metrics around how engaged people are in terms of completing or doing tasks that you ask them to do as part of the journey. And that's a good way to just measure, how are people actually consuming this information? Are they doing what we're asking them to do? Are they completing the steps that we've outlined? Tanya, what about you guys? How do you know if onboarding is working and you're kind of setting your employees up for success? How do you measure that?
We measure it throughout the performance reviews that we're doing all throughout the onboarding, and then at the end of the onboarding process, whether or not they're meeting the expectations of the role. We also have tools where they can share feedback with us, both direct and anonymously. So we look at those as well.
And what's that? I remember you said you do quite a lot of performance reviews, especially for new hires. What's the cadence of those reviews? Like, how often are they getting a performance review when they first join?
They're given usually by the month.
Oh, wow. So, and how do you, I can imagine that's quite like an intimidating, experience to have a performance review after the first month. Like, what's the format? Are they a little bit more casual and relaxed?
Yeah, it's a combination. So it's a combination of like conversations with the manager that are both informal and then some more that are formalized.
And Akbar, you are my metrics guy. What are some, metrics that, our audience can be using to measure success? And what are some things that you've done in the past to do that?
Yeah, so for 5 years, I was measured on quote unquote like quality of hire. And one of those was leavers within their first year that were not attributed to our business changes. So that was just that was owned there. Also, we used to calculate ramp up time. So how long does it? We looked through, dug through Salesforce. How long does a good account manager take to close their first meeting and get their first deal over 50K? And that allowed us to say, okay, they've been successfully onboarded to the median below or above to actually be contributing to the bottom of our actual sales funnel. We like to NPS at Education First in my previous guys, where a separate NPS survey for the recruitment process that comes out in their first week and really geared to, would you recommend this process? Then one which is done within their third month, which is NPS for their onboarding experience. And then 6 months, how do you feel about the company? That's when the first time we actually ask them generally to see if they like working here.
And I had a question I was going to ask and I've forgotten it already. Drawing a blank now. It was a good question. Okay.
Who was it for? Was it for me? For Tanya?
For you. It's for you. Oh yeah. So I remember when we talked on one of our calls about, how do you get, like, managers play such a critical role in onboarding and in the success of your onboarding program and the success of that new hire. How do you get those managers to, get engaged and take ownership in onboarding as part of measuring that onboarding success? And Akbar, I know you had some interesting stats around how much does it cost to fill a role and how do you kind of communicate that with managers?
Yeah, so this is straight from Onboarder themselves. To calculate a bad onboarding process is take their starting salary and times by 2.3. That is, that's a crazy number. So, and then if you work in the opportunity cost of what a successful hire will look like for, we used to onboard remotely enterprise salespeople who their target for first year was around 400K. So not only have you thrown that away, you've also added in the cost of rehire. And then state that explicitly to the hiring manager. You're just about to let in either 400K plus in growth for your team and your sales target for the lovely awards we might give you in October at our kickoff. Or if it doesn't go as great, or we couldn't control what we could control, this is how badly it could go. So instead of me speaking about churn rates in first year, let me speak to the language of that direct hiring manager, what will get them promoted or not.
That's a great idea. Speak their language. Cool. Thanks, everyone. Okay, I want to launch another audience poll. Let me launch it. Oh, really breaks my heart, the people who are responding that they had to eat lunch by themselves on their first day. That's so sad. Nobody should have to eat lunch by themselves on day one. Okay, I'll give you a few more seconds. Okay, there's the results. What about you guys, to our speakers? What was your worst personal onboarding experience?
I like to say that the reason that I work in onboarding now is because I didn't have the best onboarding experience. And it wasn't that it was awful, but on my first day, I actually started remotely, and my accounts weren't set up. And because of that, I wasn't receiving emails letting me know what I needed to do my first morning. So I was sitting at my computer, emailing, all of the contacts that I had spoken to, HR, anybody else, and trying to figure out where am I supposed to be. I was late for my first morning. It just was overall not the best experience.
Anybody else have any fun, not so fun stories about their worst onboarding? I think for me, one of my jobs, I started, but then I was reporting to a manager who worked out of Vancouver. So there was a 3-hour time difference. So she didn't even start until 3 hours after my day had started. And I was just kind of told, like, just, look through the website. And that wasn't fun. And also my desk was like facing a wall. So I didn't even have anybody to look at or to sit next to me. It was so bad. Anyways, okay, this is our last question to our panelists before we get into audience Q&A. What are the 1 or 2 absolute must-haves for remote onboarding and for successful remote onboarding? So Tanya, why don't we start with you?
Sure. So I would say first, make sure that you let the manager and whoever is going to be working with that person form those relationships early on. And then second, I would say make sure that in all your words and actions that you're accurately portraying the culture of the company, not what you want the culture to be, but what it currently is at that time.
Yeah. Akbar, do you want to speak to this next?
I touched on it a little bit in terms of how to get hiring manager engagement. The key thing is that the relationship should be built with the hiring manager and the employee. Ideally, you are the facilitator. So we've got to let that magic happen as much as possible. So it's being able to have a bit of a distance. In remote working is documentation, is give places that somebody can follow up on, check by themselves. Is it an intranet system that you have in place? Is it a welcome pack? Answer all the questions you were asking when you start at the beginning and write it down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Jenn?
I will say automate. I think that for any onboarding, not just remote, but especially in a time like now, is making sure that things like comms are going out on time, that you're able to track that new hires have all received the information they need before day one, and then as well, and what that first sort of week for them looks like, and then so the more you can automate and the more you can schedule, the better experience, just peace of mind for everybody, and then at both ends, your new hire and the teams that are supporting as well.
Yeah, that's a great point. I know our customer Publicis Media, their approach to their onboarding program is to automate all the low value or low impact activities like compliance paperwork and they use our tool to automate all of that activity. And then once somebody joins the company, the hiring manager takes on all that high value, high impact activity like career conversations and professional development. And that's where your manager really plays an important role. They don't need to be worrying about getting you to sign this health and safety check. Like that's all something that HR can automate. That's a great point. Any other last thoughts before we get into audience questions? Cool. Okay, guys. Well, thank you so much. Really appreciate all your insights and advice that was shared. So let's get into some questions. And this is for the audience. If you want, you can actually experience Onboarder. So if you want to just text your name to one of the numbers, depending on what region you're in, and you'll be launched into a little mini Onboarder workflow, and you can actually see what Onboarder is like from the manager and the new hire's point of view. And then also, as I said before, this is the first in an ongoing digital event series. Our next webinar will be on May 12th, and we're going to be talking all about how to create exceptional employee experiences remotely. So I'm going to just leave up the experience Onboarder numbers there so that the audience can give it a try. Let's pull up some questions. Okay. Okay, so this is a question from Charlize Clayton. When you group your cohorts for onboarding, do you group them only by start date or do you group them by function, i.e. analysts get paired with analysts or marketing gets paired with an IT person, etc.? I don't know who wants to take this. Maybe this is a question for Jenn or Akbar. How do you group?
If you want, but I've got an example if you want.
Yeah, go on then.
I'm passionately for start date. Anything that breaks the bubble of that initial team. If you really are thinking on a company-wide level, you want good networkers across all parts of your business. So do it something that is arbitrary by start date, by location right now, and you will have a closer company when we get on the other side of this.
That's great. Any other comments?
No, sorry, carry
on. This is a great question. This is from Georgia Rossini. How can we make sure that probation time still makes sense? How can I really understand someone's performance / peer feedback if we're not in the same office? Tanya, do you want to take that one?
Well, I think if you set goals and I think you could see if they're meeting the goals by the date that you're setting, and then if not, touching base with them and finding out why, and have face-to-face conversations through Zoom or another platform like that.
Yeah. And that's where that clarification piece really becomes important. If you're clearly articulating and explaining to your new hire, this is how we know that you're successful, or these are the measures for success in your role, you know, it'll be quite clear whether they're doing well or not, right?
Yeah, on that, I'd suggest the difference between a lagging indicator. So the closing of the deal, don't use that as the performance review number that you're judging against. Work backwards and say how many meetings or how many calls, what activity before would need to show some type of success.
I think, is Jenn, did we lose Jenn? It's too bad. There's some questions for her, but I can, I'll have her follow-up answer. Okay, let me pull up the questions here. Sorry guys, just bear with me for a second. This is a great question from Mark. What's the most radical initiative you've introduced to your snowboarding experience to stand out from your competitors? I think he meant onboarding experience. Let's just assume he's asking about onboarding. It's the most radical initiative you've introduced to your onboarding experience to stand out from competitors. It's a great question.
Tanya, I've got one, but I'm willing to hear your one first.
No, you can go.
I'm super proud of our CPO. We have something called Show and Tell, which used to be on a Friday afternoon where there'd be drinks and there'd be successes over the last fortnight. What they've done is be able to turn it into a live YouTube stream where it's come dine with me, where different people from different teams, we stream it onto our personal kind of internet thing where they have to cook a meal and we all vote for something. And usually if you're one of the newbies, you get put on that. So seeing people cook very unappealing pasta live in front of their colleagues is pretty fun.
That's really cute. Tanya, any?
I don't really have any to share.
I can share there. I think, you know, when we talk about wow experiences, people are expecting like, you know, fireworks and all this crazy stuff happening on your first day. And it's not really about that. It's more about just making that new hire feel special. And so we've got a lot of customers doing really unique things. One example that we see a lot of them do, and it's worked into our best practice template, is sending out a form to the new hire before they join, just like a little bit about you, ask them questions about what's their favorite 3 p.m. snack, what's their favorite cuisine, what are their hobbies. And then on day one, you would decorate their desk and personalize it based on the information that they've given you in that survey. And this is something that we practice at Onboarding too. You know, the new hire, they'll have their desk decorated for day one. We take them out for lunch and surprise them with their favorite cuisine. And we also decorate their desk with all their favorite snacks and, you know, things related to their hobbies. And it's quite cute. And it really is little things like that. It's not a lot. And the way that we do it at Onboarding and we recommend for our clients is have the person who started, when the next person starts, have that person decorate the desk. So it's always like you're kind of passing on the favor for the next new joiner. And it's kind of becomes a competition of who can out decorate each other's desks, which is really cute. So again, I don't even think onboarding doesn't need to be radical. It just needs to be personal and thoughtful. Any other ideas? I'm curious to hear from the audience too, if you want to enter in your chat, if if your companies are doing anything really interesting with your onboarding or really unique ideas. Yeah, Lynn says, have your leadership do a video welcome. I spoke to one lady and she said that the CEO calls every single new hire to say welcome, which is pretty, I mean, depending on how big your company is, that's a lot. But you could easily do a video on the go or a pre-recorded video. Trisha says, our workers are all construction on the field, so we did a who was waiting for you at home. That's really cute. Trisha says, then we remember to ask about their children and spouse by name. That is such a nice touch. Peter says, CEO sends a signed book to all new starters. Monique says, our commissioner writes handwritten welcome notes and schedules a meeting with each new hire. Yeah, that's so nice. Our customer Vodafone, as part of their welcome survey, they ask the new hire, how do you take your tea? And then on the new hire's first day, they'll welcome them with a cup of tea the way they like it. Okay, I think it's time to wrap up. Happy to hear any more ideas if the audience wants to share in the chat. Otherwise, thank you so much to our panelists for joining today. Jenn messaged me and she said that her internet died, but luckily it died at the end of the presentation. But thank you to Tanya and to Akbar for joining. Yes, to Odette, who just asked if the video is recorded. It is. We will send out the recording and the link in a couple days, so you'll hear from us. And we'll also send out the link to the next webinar. Cool. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. Really appreciate your time. Thank you to our amazing panelists for joining. And
Thank you, guys.
have a wonderful day. And hopefully we'll see you again at our next webinar on May 12th.
Thank you.
Bye. Thanks, guys.
Well, guys, bye.
Thank you.